No shortage of fireworks in court today for the final day of E. Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump, with closing arguments focus on a high-stakes question. What is the price to pay for using one of the world's most powerful megaphones to defame someone? First up, Carroll's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, she addressed the factor that has been looming over this entire trial. That is Trump's continued attacks on E. Jean Carroll. She pointed out that Trump, quote, spent the entire trial continuing to engage in defamation. Trump dramatically stormed out of the courtroom. The judge noted the incident for court record, and then Kaplan continued. CNN reports that she said, quote, the case is also about punishing Donald Trump for what he has done and what he continues to do. She said that Trump tries to, quote, normalize conduct that could hardly be more abnormal. She went on to say, quote, typically, when someone is found liable for defamation, they stop making those statements, even if they don't like the jury's verdict. Even if you don't like the jury's decision, you follow it. Those are the rules. This trial is also about something much more profound, whether the rules that apply to everyone else, to you, to me, to Ms. Carroll, whether they also apply to Donald Trump. The ex-president was back in the courtroom for his attorney, Alina Habba's closing arguments. NBC News reports Habba's closing got off to a rough start, with Judge Kaplan objecting to her twice and warning that further violations of his orders would bring consequences. The first objection came when Habba claimed that the reason Trump has continued to deny the assault after being found liable was because it was, quote, the truth. The second came when she said that Carroll's account had, quote, more holes than Swiss cheese, which prompted his warning. Habba did not stop there. She continued to imply that Carroll was lying, once again from NBC News. The judge replied that the fact that Mr. Trump sexually assaulted Ms. Carroll is established. When Habba pushed back, the judge reprimanded her, saying, you will not quarrel with me. Habba also downplayed the torrent of threats Carroll received in the wake of accusing Trump of sexual assault. Pointing to the 6 threats shown to the jury during the trial, Habba said, quote, that's me on a good day and President Trump. That earned her an immediate rebuke from Judge Kaplan. Carroll's attorneys had the last word before the case was put in the hands of the jury. Attorney Sean Crowley taking a shot at Team Trump, saying, quote, I will follow the rules of this courtroom, which Mr. Trump and his lawyer don't seem to know how to do. And then she took a sledgehammer to Trump's defense. From CNN, quote, Ms. Carroll did not ask to be called a liar. She did not ask to be called ugly. She didn't ask for death threats. She didn't ask to be accused of lying. Crowley said Carroll came forward because she thought it was finally time to speak publicly about what he, extending her arm and pointing directly at Trump, had done to her. The law protects her from being defamed for telling the truth, Crowley said. He's still breaking the law, literally, to this day. And that is where we start today with MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin, who was inside the courtroom for us today, plus former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice and co-host of the MSNBC podcast, one of my favorites, prosecuting Donald Trump. Andrew Weissman is here, and MSNBC host and legal analyst Katie Phang is back. Lisa, an incredibly dramatic day in that courtroom. Talk to us about what it is that happened.
You know, Alicia, one of the things that happened today that I think is really important to underscore for our viewers is that in addition to the presentations, the competing presentations about the facts of this case, folks also got a presentation about the meaning of the jury itself. Alina Habba really trying to diminish the importance of something that Judge Kaplan, as you noted, has instructed this jury already they must take to be true, that Donald Trump sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll in the spring of 1996, and that he defamed her already by virtue of statements virtually identical to the ones that are at issue in this case. That's when Alina Habba said it was a verdict of the jury, and Kaplan quickly shot back. It was a verdict of this court. It's established, Ms. Habba. Now, contrast that with how Kaplan himself referred to the jury and his instructions to this jury. At the very close of all of his instructions, he invoked the Constitution, reading from the preamble, "We the people," and reminding them that the jury is embodied in the Constitution not once, but twice, that what they are doing here is so foundational to our democracy that it is enshrined in the Constitution, and that they have a responsibility and a duty to take those responsibilities as seriously as they possibly can to deliver justice fairly and impartially. And if everyone in the courtroom was really struck by the seriousness and weightiness of Judge Kaplan's words, particularly when contrasted to how Alina Habba tried to sort of brush off and dismiss the prior jury verdict with respect to E. Jean Carroll. Alicia.
Well, to that point, Katie, I want your take on what happened today, because for me, as a non-lawyer watching this all play out, Carroll's legal team, Trump's legal team, it's a study in contrast. We've seen that throughout this trial, but today it felt brought into particularly stark relief.
Yeah, and obviously it was punctuated when Donald Trump gets up in the middle of Robbie Kaplan's closing arguments and storms out of the courtroom. And the reason why it was just so impactful is that no one does that, especially in federal court, except Donald Trump thinks that that's something that he's allowed to do. And that completely played perfectly into the theme of the closing arguments for E. Jean Carroll's lawyers. Donald Trump thinks he's above the law. Donald Trump thinks that the law has nothing to do with him. And yet, look at this. He's getting up and he's walking out of the courtroom in the middle of closing arguments. The jurors, they have to be there, Alicia. They're there not by choice. They've been summoned to appear. They are doing their solemn duty, as Lisa refers to. And so they are taking their job seriously. But, you know, Robbie Kaplan really summed it up appropriately, right? When she said the first trial, Donald Trump didn't even bother to show up. But this one is about damages, and this one's about his money, and that's the reason why he's here. But the irreverence that Donald Trump, his lawyers have shown consistently throughout these judicial proceedings just underscores the fact that he thinks, he being Donald Trump, that he is above the law. But, you know, the jurors have the last laugh, don't they? And if they deliver a verdict to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, then Donald Trump will certainly be sulking and skulking away.
Well, and Andrew, that irreverence that Katie just referenced, it sits not well with any of us, given how solemn this moment is. During closing arguments, you had attorney Sean Crowley pointing directly at Trump, accusing him of breaking the law, which I think we just got to take a step back and say that is an incredibly bold and brave thing to single out a former president of the United States, the current Republican frontrunner, and to put him on the spot. Talk to us about that moment.
Well, I think what the plaintiff's counsel was trying to do was to, in many ways, embody what Lisa talked about, which was the seriousness of this. Also, to sort of not give reverence to and to put Donald Trump on some kind of pedestal, but to say, look, this is somebody who's defamed. This is somebody who sexually assaulted the victim here. She actually said there is a victim here. It is not Donald Trump. And I think one way to think about this, which I think both Katie and Lisa are getting at, is that this is a microcosm of what occurred today, is a microcosm of what we are facing as a country. You have Donald Trump trying to say the rule of law doesn't matter. It was a plain appeal to jury nullification. The reason Alina Habba was sort of slapped down twice by the judge in her closings was because it was a blatant appeal to jury nullification, meaning do not follow the instructions that the judge gives you. That is improper as a lawyer, but that is what Donald Trump has done during January 6th. That is the reason for those charges, is that he wanted election nullification. He still does, and is promulgating that. And so this is very much what we are seeing as a country. We're seeing it if you just look at what's happening in Texas in terms of the conduct of the governor there. If you look at the sort of embracing of that by people in Congress, leaders of the Republican Party in Congress, that sense of the rule of law trying to be upheld in the courtroom by the judge, by the plaintiff's counsel here, and the effort by Donald Trump and his counsel and many others to sort of really denigrate that when it's inconvenient for them. So I really think this is a sort of microcosm of what we are facing as a country.
I agree. It is a microcosm, and I think the frustration that you are sensing from Judge Kaplan is a frustration that is held by many of us. There was another exchange that happened before closing arguments even started. This is from NBC's reporting. In a tense exchange over entering some social media posts into evidence, Kaplan told Habba that she was on the verge of spending some time in the lockup and told her to sit down. Judge Kaplan has no patience for Team Trump's antics, which we have seen a lot of day in, day out. I get, Andrew, that they are approaching this as though it's a political argument and not a legal argument. And yet, the decision here is going to be made by a jury. I can't imagine that any of this, when we are legally speaking, helps Trump at all.
If the jury does its duty, I completely agree with you. And their job is to figure out damages. They have to figure out whether there is compensatory damages in the amount and the punitive damages. There are factual issues there that you want them to go through. You don't want them reacting just emotionally. But it is very hard to see how the antics of Donald Trump himself today aren't going to lead to consequences in terms of the jury verdict, because they're allowed to take that into consideration because, as Eugene Carroll's lawyer said, what is the amount of money to get him to stop? And if you just looked at his behavior in the courtroom, that is something that they're allowed to take into account. But as I mentioned, I don't think that he is playing for that audience of 9 jurors. He is playing to a very different audience to denigrate the whole idea of the rule of law in this country. And just remember, as a former president of the United States.
Into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
So, come on, when is it not, please? Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah, I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
The Megatron.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We're facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark craft. General!
National security advisor. Stay down. Check it out. The mission is outrageous.